Michael, welcome to Locked In, man. Shout out to, why did I just drop the name right off the top of my head?
I have no idea.
Kyle,
oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Kyle Overmeyer,
Yes.
Overmeyer, who is a corrupt sheriff on the show.
Yes.
He's connected me to quite a few guests, and now here we are.
He's a really good guy.
And you just got out of prison.
2 weeks ago.
I remember he called me, and I thought it was going to be much longer. He's like, hey, I got this guy. He's right now in a foreign Dominican Republic, right?
Yeah.
He's in prison there, but he'll love to do your show. I was like, yeah, just have him reach out when he's out. Send me an email. And then like a week later, or a few days later, I get the email from you. I'm like, oh, that's fast. And you just happen to be on Long Island.
Yeah. He told me that you were in Connecticut. So I was like, I'm in Connecticut all the time. I go to Mohegan and Foxwoods. I do a lot of business out there. And he told me that you were in Connecticut. I was like, we're in Connecticut. He was like, right on New York border. I was like, cool, done, easy.
Yeah, he made it seem like you were still in Florida and staying there. So I didn't think it was going to happen this quick.
I came to New York for the holidays because my kids came to New York. So we met in New York. We did the family thing. And now we're going back to Florida. We're going to Florida on Thursday.
Well, escaping the cold weather.
Right?
It's 25 degrees today.
Yeah, but it's like 45 there. It's not much better. It's
better than here and it not snowing. So did you grow up in New York? Or?
Yeah. Long Island, born and raised in Valley Stream. Went to Valley Stream South High School. And I've been in New York my whole life. I had a place in Rhode Island for a while and a place in Connecticut for a while, but always New York.
Who'd you grow up with?
What do you mean who I grew up with?
Like, you're the second person to ask me that today. Normally everyone always understands it. Now it's 0 for 2. Like parents, siblings, all that.
My mother and father till I was about 16, 17. And my father and mother got divorced and really stopped talking to him off and on for 25 years. As a matter of fact, when I was in jail, my mother reached out to him and we started talking. And I get this phone call. And he helped me out a little bit and stuff while I was in jail. And I get this phone call from his stepson that he just died one night. Like I spoke to him 2 days before. And like we were just trying to establish a relationship. It was just straight bizarre. He just died in his sleep one day. No idea. I spoke to him 2 days before.
How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I mean, we went so long without talking. And then he started helping me and stuff like that. I mean, it was a shock. I was super close with him when I was growing up, but it felt strange. You know, it was like the day after I got arrested, my mother got diagnosed with breast cancer. And then I got divorced. And then, it was just, and then my oldest son had to be taken out of school. So it was just like shit on top of shit on top of shit. It was insane what was happening. But yeah.
What do your parents do for work growing up?
My mother owns a beauty salon, still does. And my father owned a process serving company, surprisingly, since he sent his people to serve legal papers for lawyers.
So did you guys have money growing up?
Upper middle class. We weren't poor by any means. We weren't wealthy, but upper middle class.
And you went to public schooling?
Went to public school. I went to private school from kindergarten to 2nd or 3rd grade, and then I went for public school for the rest.
Any problems in high school or pretty normal?
No, I mean, I was a pothead, but that was about it. I mean, was I a straight A student? No, but no problems. Yeah.
How would people describe you? Were you like an outcast or were you sociable?
No, I was popular. I was popular in high school. I was popular. It was very strange because I always fit in with my primary group was kind of the metalheads. And then I fit in with the jocks because I played football. And I always fit in with everybody, and I always hung out in big groups, but I never had any issues with anything. No, it was, I was always a popular kid, had a lot of friends, I'm personable, I think, with these looks, you got to be personable,
What were your aspirations? Did you want to go to college? What were you thinking career-wise?
I was never a school kid, So actually, the story is I went to high school. I was going to high school, and in very beginning of 12th grade, I met the mother of my children, and that was 98. Yeah, 98, September of 98. And we went to the city. You ever been to the Halloween parade in the city?
No, never.
So we went to the Halloween Day parade on the city, and we're walking, and, you know, freaks, geeks, and weirdos were all over the place. And this lady that's dressed in plain clothes starts following us, like this older lady. And it's like 2 or 3 blocks she's following us, and like blatantly staring. My ex-wife, very attractive woman, and very attractive girl at the time. And she was wearing this Little Red Riding Hood costume. I'll never forget this. And she like nudges me. She's like, this lady's following us. I was like, all right. So I give it a couple more blocks and I turn off. I was going to turn around and say, like, what's up? You know, what's going on? And she immediately whips out a business card and she was like, I'm from XYZ Model Management. And ends up that the modeling company that she represented, she was an agent for the modeling company, was represented like Naomi Campbell and Kate Moss and Stella Tennant and all like the big Victoria's Secret girls. My ex-wife was 5'9", 120, beautiful girl. So she started modeling. So me and my ex-wife were getting really close. She was 19 and I was 17. And I was never much of a school kid. So I was like, fuck this, I'm dropping out of high school. So I was in my senior year of high school and I dropped out. So I would go to the city with her every day. And I got a job in the city. And I would go to the city every day with her while she was modeling. And that's my education, you know, and then I started working, you know, and that's how it went.
Hey everyone, it's your host of Locked In, and I want to thank you for tuning in to today's show. Remember, by leaving a comment on YouTube or Spotify, or leaving a review on Spotify and Apple goes a long way to helping me put out and produce consistent content. I also try to respond to as many comments as possible, and yes, it's me actually responding to them, so keep dropping those comments. I appreciate all the feedback we get and the love and support. Now, before we get further into this crazy episode, I want to thank Factor for sponsoring this show. Head over to factormeals.com/lockedin50off and use code LOCKEDIN50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. I'll tell you more about Factor later in this episode. What were you doing for work?
I started working. She wasn't a big fan of modeling, so I just took like a job in the city. I think it was at like an ice cream shop. I don't know what the hell it was. So she wasn't a big fan of modeling, so she left. And at the time, subsequently, I sued my father. What happened was my mother and father got divorced. I stopped speaking to him. And I get this letter in the mail. And it was from, do you know what a UGMA account is?
No.
It's a United Gifts to Minor Act. And it was from Merrill Lynch. And it said that I had this account, like this United Gifts to Minors account. And it was like 10 grand in it or whatever it was. And I called him up and I was like, you owe me $10,000. He was like, I don't owe you shit. And he was like, it was your grandmother's money who passed away, his mother. And I used it basically as a tax shelter. So you ain't getting shit. So I served him with papers, and 2 weeks later I had a check in the mail for 10 grand. So I had a little money, and my ex-wife, Melissa, the mother of my kids, loved Connecticut. We loved Connecticut. So we got a place in Connecticut up in Windsor. And I started working for this company, RDP Group. And RDP Group produced conventions. So I was actually working on a dog and cat show, like a pet expo at the garden. But there was this guy in the corner, and he like had a partnership with the owner, but I didn't know how it worked. But he was working on a porn convention. So I was like, that's really interesting, you know? So 9/11 happened. And 9/11 happened, and for like, I guess when something like that happens, even though we didn't have any family in the buildings or like that passed away from it, we just wanted to be back home. You understand what I'm saying? So we wanted to be back home. And I was the type of person that was like, well, if I could work for a company doing it, I'm going to do it myself. And by the way, I want to do porn because that guy was doing it and I'm 20 years old and that's fucking awesome. You know, so I started a sex convention. at 20 years old. And I'll never forget, it was called the San Francisco Sex Expo. And you could Google this. I did it at the on Market Street, right? You ever been to San Francisco?
Maybe when I was a kid.
Yeah. So I did it on Market Street. So Market Street's the center of the LGBTQ world in San Francisco. So I didn't do much research on the dates, but subsequently it was the same weekend as the Gay and Lesbian Pride Parade in San Francisco. So I'm thinking that if I have representation from that segment, I'll get more of a crowd, right? You would think. But I get there and like you can't walk in the streets. I don't know if you ever seen something like this, but the Gay and Lesbian Pride Parade in San Francisco is like bigger than the Macy's Day Parade and Thanksgiving. You know, it's ginormous. So it took me, I was down the block from my convention center. It took me 2 hours to walk to the convention center. And the worst feeling in the world for an event producer is to sit in an empty hall. And I did that my first time around. And I mean, I had vendors that couldn't even get there type of thing because all this shit was going on. So that was my first experience. So now I was broke and because I put it all on this and I had no idea what I was going to do. So I went and started working for a investment company. I became a stockbroker, essentially. I started doing that.
Why San Francisco for your first one? Why didn't you just do that out here?
It was surprisingly, it was really hard to get a venue that would take it. I needed 100,000 square feet, in a public area in a major city that would take a sex convention. And nobody wanted to. So I started calling around, and San Francisco has always been like a really progressive market, so I said, why not? LA had 100 of them. Vegas had them. And I thought San Francisco because why not, There's a really good meme I like that I came across years ago where it's like, don't expect this, which is a crowded room, if you've never expected this, which is an empty room. Facts.
And as a concert promoter, back in the day, we've all had those nights. You put everything on the line and there's no one there. At least in my day and age, back then, we had online ticket sales by that point. So you knew it was going to be a tank night. But when I first started out, it was just, there was no online ticketing. Yeah. It was just, if a snowstorm hit or rain, you were done.
Right.
But there would be nights I sold no tickets and 1,500 people would show up and it would be good.
It's still like that. I mean, like I've been producing conventions since then, and it's still like that. I've had 25,000 people at a show and I've had 2,000 people at a show. It's no matter what you do, you could advertise a bunch and get nobody, and you could advertise a little and get 20,000 people. I mean, in some respects, it's a crapshoot. The weather and what's going on that weekend and everything else in the world. But it's a fun business. I've done 100 shows in my life, and I love doing it. I mean, on my business card it says CEO, executive producer, professional socialite. So I sit around and I travel the world and I take people out to dinner and I introduce people for a living. I think that's awesome, Yeah,
that is really cool.
Yeah.
So you go into the investment world.
So I go into the investment world and I get my license and I start working for an investment company. And I start doing really, really well. And I'm making a ton of money. And I don't like working for people. So I said, screw this, I'm going out on my own. So I went on my own and I opened up an office and I hired 6 or 7 brokers and they're working for me. And I'm making $350,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. And I'm in my mid-20s, I'm like, I'm doing well, And I used to have this one client. All my clients were based out of state, most of them, but I had this one client in New York and we would go out to lunch every time. He was a degenerate gambler. He loved the market. And we were sitting at breakfast one day and I said, I got to get out. He said, what do you mean you got to get out? You're making a stupid amount of money. You're in your mid-20s. You have a fantastic business. Where are you going, I said, I just don't like going to work anymore. Like, I just don't like fucking going to work anymore, He said, well, what are you going to do? And I wanted to do a sex convention in New York. I had this in the back. I had to do this.
Couldn't get it out of your mind.
I couldn't get it out of
You had to try it. You had to see it through.
So I pitched him the idea. He was like, well, I have a lot of ties to New York, so I'd rather not do it in New York because of the industry. Could we do it somewhere else? He said, well, what if I see somebody I know at the show? I said, well, you're investing in the show. He's at the fucking show. Who's the bigger pervert? You know, like that type of thing. So he told me, turned around later in the conversation, he was like, would you take private money? I said, fuck yes, I would take private money. So he wrote me a check for $350,000.
Really? Wow.
So I opened up a brand and I started Ecstasy. It was EXXTACY. That was the name of it. And we had our first show in 2010 in Chicago. We had 20,000 people there. And it was the first time something's ever been like there in Chicago since like the 80s. It was incredible. But we had full nudity. We did a fuck a fan, you know, like we did a lot of things that like mainstream, like the AVN Awards won't do. So I did that for between conventions and like doing like tours. I did tours for porn chicks and we went to different adult shops and different strip clubs and did feature tours and the whole thing. Did that for about off and on about 9 years. So fast forward, my ex-wife, the mother of my children, really wasn't crazy about that industry, to say the least. So I got out and I started working for Cablevision. You know Cablevision?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. So I started working for Cablevision. I was that guy that if you went to Fios, I would knock on your door and at 6 o'clock at night while you were eating dinner and say, you want to switch back to cable? Great job, by the way. It was if you're going to work for somebody, that's the job you want. I worked pretty much 4 hours a day, made $150,000 a year.
Wait, they paid that much?
Well, it was, yeah, their big thing is acquisition. So we were like the creme de la creme of the sales force because we were door-to-door guys, you know? So, you know, we went to people's houses, and that's when the Fios and Cablevision wars were really going crazy. We went to people's houses and we would knock and give them everything we could for free. And for that, we just got crazy commissions. Like there were times that I was making, you know, $600, $700, $800 a sale selling cable, saving them money from their cable. It was the best job in the world. The best job in the world. So, but again, I wanted to own my own business. I can't work. I'm a terrible employee. Terrible. So me and my ex-wife at the time were having a lot of problems and we were just about to get divorced and I quit Cablevision and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do at this point. So we get divorced and I just quit smoking and I was hanging out in this vape lounge. My friend, I became friendly with this guy and it wasn't like a vape shop where you go and you buy your shit and you leave. It was like a bar where, you know, you would go in, they had a pool table there and we would always be joking around. We would order food there and it was just like, I would go there and kill a few hours and I became friendly with the guy. And so he was like, I bought this, and he made his own juice and stuff. And he was like, I bought this booth at a vape convention they're doing in Jersey. I know you used to produce conventions and I've never done a show before. So could you kind of like tag along with me and help me? I was like, sure, I'd love to see this anyway. So I go there and it's at the New Jersey Convention Center in right over the bridge over there. And I walk in and it's just a fucking disaster. I mean, nothing is happening the way it needs to happen. You know, it's a disaster. The mayor actually came in on the Saturday and stopped the entire convention for indoor smoking. So it was a fucking disaster. So I was like, I'm going to do a vape convention. So I said, where in the Northeast could I do a vape convention where I could smoke inside because everyone's non-smoking? And I said, well, the casinos in Connecticut are really the only places because it has a ton of people and you're allowed to smoke inside. So let's do that. So I called up Foxwoods. And again, I barely have rent money at this point. I called up Foxwoods and I get a rep on the phone and I was like, how much do you need to secure dates? They were like $5,000. So I got off the phone. I begged, borrowed, and stole until I found $5,000. I sent him $5,000, and I'll never forget. One of my buddies, one of my friends, came over with her laptop, and I had my cell phone and my laptop, and I grinded the phones for hours every day. Me and her, we just grinded the phones, and I got my first big sponsor. And 6 months later, I had my first show, and we had 17,000 people at my first show. And every 3 months after that, for 8 years or so, or 7 years, I did a convention. And we always had good conventions. My biggest conventions were always in Connecticut because that was my home base. So COVID hit. And it was 2 weeks before my biggest show. We moved to Mohegan Sun because they just built a big convention center. It was the biggest show of the year for me. I have 25,000 people coming to this convention, and COVID hit. My rep calls me up. And I never forget, I'm going to visit a client in New Hampshire. And my rep calls me up. He was like, "You hear about this?" I was like, "Yeah, I heard about it. What are we doing?" He was like, "Well, I think we should bump it 2 weeks." And a year and a half later goes by, nothing, 2 weeks started into that, and we're in gloves and waiting online for toilet paper, So I came up with this idea. So I was instantly out of business, So I'm really into poker. So I started those online poker clubs. I started one of those, and I started the Poker Bros clubs, and that got me through COVID pretty much. But I had to get back to business. So I said to myself, where can we do an experience like this, but not involve consumers, because we can't have consumer events? And where could we kind of make the same connections? So I'm talking to my friend, and we're like, well, why don't you take buyers, people who own distros or retail shops, and take vendors who manufacture goods, and go to a really cool location in the Caribbean. Go to an all-inclusive resort and have one-on-one meetings with the buyers and the vendors, and just party and hang out and, drink for a week, and everybody makes money. I said, that's a fucking awesome idea. Let's do it. So I went on my own and I did it. Now, I went on my own and did it. And it was super, super crazy successful. It was great. And we were doing, I think, 4 or 5 a year. We were doing them every 2-3 months. I mean, they were great. We had 20 vendors, 20 buyers. No, I didn't have to worry about getting 25,000 people at a show. I knew who was coming, and that's what it was. We would go to DR, and we would go to Chicago. We would go to Jamaica, and we would go to Mexico, and we would go get 60 rooms at an all-inclusive resort, and we would go there, and we would just hang out and drink and party and chill for, weeks. Now, during COVID, the vape industry and the marijuana industry kind of merged. It became counterculture, not vape or not marijuana. It just became counterculture. So glass came into it, and weed came into it, and then Delta 8 sprung up as more states were getting legal. So we had both vape vendors, and then like Delta 8 and glass and smoke shop vendors coming, along with smoke shop owners and distros coming. So 7 events went really, really well. And we were at the 8th one. We were about 3 days in, and shipping, my vendors shipped like samples and promo items and hats and t-shirts and bullshit to this shipping company who was based in Miami, who had an office in DR, who I was introduced to through a vendor, and they would all ship it. And then the shipping company would palletize it and ship it to the resort. Cool. I told my vendors, I didn't see a box or pack a box or anything like that. Told my vendors, don't ship anything illegal in DR. We're cool. I'll go sign for it. I went through customs. It's not like I was going on a fucking banana boat. It was going through customs, So I go to sign for it, and I have 20 Dominican DEA agents pointing machine guns at my head, and I'm shitting my pants because I've never been in a pair of handcuffs before in my life. It's intense. and I don't speak the language, you know, and so they arrest me and they bring me, I don't know if you've ever been to the DR?
No.
So Punta Cana is on one end of the island where all the resorts are, right? And Santo Domingo is the capital, which is about 4 hours away or 3.5 hours away. So they drive me from Punta Cana to Santo Domingo in like a convoy in the middle of the night. I have no fucking idea what's going. Zero. I have two guys with machine guns sitting next to me, prosecutor in the front seat. It's like mayhem. 4 or 5 cars, you know, in a row. And they bring me to this drug enforcement. It's called the DNCD. And they bring me to this drug enforcement like holding cell. So we're there for the night, and my ex-wife, my second wife at the time, she's in DR, and she has this, her father has a best friend whose wife is Dominican, and the wife has an uncle who's a lawyer. So my ex-wife calls me up and says, well, so-and-so has an uncle that's a lawyer. He's a big lawyer in DR. We're just going to let him handle it. It shouldn't be more than a couple of days. So we have to go, the next day we go to the prosecutor's office in Santo Domingo. So it's the cops, the DNCD agents bring me and my ex-wife and my travel agent with the lawyer go to the prosecutor's office. So me and my ex-wife are sitting at one desk with my travel agent, and my lawyer and the prosecutor are sitting at the desk right in front of us, and we have no idea what the fuck is going on because they're speaking Spanish. So long story short, they bring me out in handcuffs, and I was like, am I leaving? Am I staying? What exactly is happening here? So I get brought to this other jail. Now, just as a prelude, I haven't cried in 25 years. I'm not a crier. I'm a sensitive guy, but I'm not a crier by any means. And I'm hysterical this entire time. I have no idea what's going on. Zero. And I go to this, like, Rikers Island. It's like a before you go to real jail, it's like this jail type of thing.
Like a county jail type of setting. Yeah.
Like a holding type of thing, yeah. And I get put in there. And again, I don't know, nobody speaks English, zero. And they're kind of like showing me where to go and whatever, going through the motions, but I don't know what's going on. So my ex-wife, either I get to call her, right? I call her, and they're saying that the prosecutor said to my lawyer that if we give them $140,000, this all goes away. Like the fucking Wild West, right? So I didn't have $140,000 at the time. And the lawyer was like, no, fuck this. I'll see you in court. We're going to get this dropped. So now, in Dominican Republic, you're supposed to see a judge in 48 hours. Well, we went to court 48 hours after this happened, but we didn't see a judge because there was no translator assigned for me. The court didn't assign a translator, so I have to know what's going on. So now they rescheduled it for a week later. So now I'm in jail 9 days. I have no idea what I'm being booked with. I have no idea what I'm looking at. I think I'm spending like an overnighter, like I'm doing an overnighter. I don't know what's going on.
Let's be honest, life gets crazy and staying on top of your nutrition isn't always easy. But what if I told you there's a way to eat gourmet, dietitian-approved meals in just 2 minutes? That's right, 2 minutes. That's where Factor comes in. Whether you're crushing it at work, chasing your fitness goals, or just trying to get through a busy day, Factor has your back. This year, I made a commitment to take my fitness to the next level. I'm doing 6 intense workouts a week, boxing, strength training, you name it, and I knew my diet had to keep up. That's where Factor has been a total game changer. Their meals are fresh, delicious, and perfectly portioned to fuel my workouts. After an intense boxing session, I don't have time to cook and keep up with this podcast, and I definitely don't want to clean up. With Factor, I just heat up a meal like their garlic herb chicken or a protein plus option, and I'm good to go. It's fast, easy, and delicious, and it also keeps me on track. Factor isn't just about convenience, it's about quality. They offer over 40 options every week, tailored to your goals, whether it's calorie smart, keto, or protein plus, and it's not just meals. They've got smoothies, snacks, and breakfast to keep you fueled all day long. I've personally tried those smoothies, and let me tell you, they are A+. Plus, everything arrives fresh and fully prepared. No prep, no mess, no excuses. Let's give a huge shout out to Factor for sponsoring today's episode. If you're ready to eat smarter and feel your best like me, head over to factormeals.com/lockedin50off and use code LOCKEDIN50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's factormeals.com/lockedin50off and code LOCKEDIN50off for 50% off plus free shipping. Trust me, your body and your schedule will thank you. And guys, let's be honest, 50% off is way too good of a deal to pass up to at least try it. So give it a try, head to Factor. Now let's get back into this absolutely insane episode. Were you safe in there? Like, were the inmates looking at you any type of way?
I was the gringo, and later in the story we'll get to this, but it was very apparent that they could extort me and they could charge me more for things, but they couldn't touch me. That was kind of the rule. You know, they weren't to touch me. I was not to get harmed because they knew that's when the embassy would get involved. So 9 days, and we have this lawyer, and I don't know what's going on. So we go to court, and I thought, this is where I thought I'm going home. I'm going home now. So we went to court, and we finally have a translator. They tell me I'm being booked for international narcotics trafficking. I had D8 pens, man. I had D8 pens and a few gummies. They weren't even mine. So the judge gives me 2 months in jail they didn't give me bail because they thought I was a flight risk, for the prosecutor or the DA to prepare their case. So that's where we are now. And so we go back to this, I guess, Rikers Island type of place. And now when I went to jail, I'll show you pictures. I was 323 pounds. I was big. I was a big guy. I've always been a big guy. But I wasn't eating because, number one, I'd never been in jail. Number two, I don't eat that. You know, that's not what we eat, you know?
What was the food there? What was that like?
It was dirty, and it was just like a lot of rice and like weird looking meat, man. You know, like I don't even know what it was, but I wasn't eating it, you know? So they had a little tiny commissary in there where you could put $40. My lawyer would put $40 a week or whatever it was. And I would buy crackers and cookies, and that's what I would eat. You know, that's what I eat. So about 3 weeks, I got really friendly with this guy who was being paid off by my lawyer. He was a prison guard, and he kind of watched me and that I wasn't getting killed or hurt. The embassy still hasn't been there, by the way. So about 3 weeks later, I go to court. No, I get a call. Everybody calls. Like, we're being transferred. Now, I'm freaking the fuck out because I don't want to go to like a big prison. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm crying, you know, like that's what my life is. I spoke to my kids a few times. I didn't know what was going on, you know? So the guy, the guard who I'm friendly with says, don't worry, your case is not going to be delayed or anything, because I didn't know maybe if I go to a bigger prison, maybe my case is going to be delayed. Maybe this is turning into an actual case. Wait, I screwed up. While we were at the 2-month hearing or whatever that first court appearance was, my lawyer at the time goes on television, calls all these reporters in the Dominican Republic and goes on television. There's reporters waiting in the courtroom and outside. And my lawyer tells them that the district attorney tried to extort us for $140,000 and planted ecstasy in the palate. Now, I don't know much about Dominican law, but that's not good for us. Because, I mean, you take a corrupt country and you add accusing a corrupt district attorney of planting drugs. I under any circumstance, I don't see it being good. So now we're going to the big jail. And this guard is telling me, don't worry, they have smartphones in there and you could smoke pot, you could smoke cigarettes, and, you know, it's a lot easier of an atmosphere. All right, but I'm still not thrilled because I want to go home to my kids, you know? So we get to this prison, right? And, you know, I told you I was upper middle income coming home, and when I was always doing the shows, I was going to 5 Diamond Resorts, and I was doing really well. I had a $150,000 wedding, you know, like I lived an okay life. I wasn't wealthy, but I was very comfortable. So I was always more of like a Ritz-Carlton type of guy instead of, you know, this. So we get there, and there's cockroaches the size of your feet, you know, like rats, like house cats, you know, like that type of thing. And like the first jail was cleaner than the second jail. Whereas like for 6 months I was reusing plastic spoons type of thing. Like there was not, like it was bad. So we get there and they kind of like bring me through the process. They question me. It was like an intake kind of thing. And this guy comes, and his name was Montero. So at this jail, there's like a pecking order with like security guards and like whatever. So there was this guy at the top who was 5 stripes. He had 5 stripes on his collar. Then and he was the director. He was the top guy. He ran the prison. Then there was 2 guys under him that alternated weeks who had 4 stripes. They were subdirectors. So when they were there, they were basically in charge of day-to-day stuff. So Montero was a 4-stripe. So Montero came, and again, I don't speak in Spanish. So Montero brought this guy, Roy, who spoke English. And Roy's going to basically carry us through the rest of the story. So Roy spoke English, and he introduced me to Roy. He was an inmate. So Montero said, the way this goes is Roy is in general population. But before you get to general population, you have to go in like observation for 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm freaking out. I'm like, number one, I shouldn't be here for more than 2 or 3 weeks. And number 2, what the fuck is observation? And number 3, where am I, like, who's in like, is there anybody there that I could speak to? So they put me in the observation area. They called it the plancha. So it's like kind of like the section of the jail where, like, it's kind of like the hole type of thing, like that division. So Montero's sitting there and I'm talking to him and he's letting me use his phone like on Google Translate because we can't understand each other. So he's like, all right, let me think what I'm going to do. There's this guy in maximum security in a section of this where I'm going of the jail. He speaks English. I'll put you in this separate room. It's still in the same section of the prison, but you won't be in observation. It's a lot calmer and it'll be maximum security. So just stay there until I can get you into general population. Fine. So I meet this guy, his name is William. And William, he was I think he got deported from the US, but he was in there. Turned out to be a real dirtbag. So at this time, my ex-wife at the time, she was already back in New York. My mother, the day after I got arrested, my mother got diagnosed with breast cancer. And all I really have is my non-English speaking lawyer and this guy, William, who I don't know from a hole in the wall. And I have no way to even get money. I can't get money in my commissary because it's not like the United States where you go on a fucking app and you put money in commissary for somebody. You have to bring money to the jail. And this jail was 3 hours away from Santo Domingo where my lawyer was, so he couldn't even drop off, or 2 hours away from Santo Domingo, so he couldn't even drop off money for me. So I had no money, I didn't know what to do. So we figured out a way that if my mother Western Unioned William money, his family would put it in my commissary and I would be able to eat. Cool. Seems good, right? So my mother or a friend or whoever, my ex-wife at the time might have done it, sends William $200. Well, I saw $50, So I'm getting ripped off already. This is just starting and I'm getting ripped off. And you can't leave this room because it's maximum security. So we couldn't go outside. We went outside once a week. And it looked like a scene out of Silence of the Lambs. Like when we were walking around the basketball court or on the basketball court, there were 10 agents with machine guns watching us, making sure we weren't leaving. It wasn't for me, but that's where they stuck me because of this guy. So now I go to the director, and the director was really sympathetic to my situation. Montero and the director kind of understood that I shouldn't have been there. They kind of understood that this was just all a fucked up situation. So I said, look, could you just put me in general population? We're about 10 days in. I said, could you just put me in general population? At least I'll be able to walk around. I'll be able to go out. I'll be able to, kind of have some sort of leeway. Now, mind you, phones aren't legal there, but everybody has one, right? So he said, all right, I'll put you at Roy, make room in the cell. I'll put you at Roy, and he's a good guy, and he'll kind of show you the ropes. Now, I don't know how it is in prison in the United States, but in prison there, at least in this prison, there's 4 buildings, like general pop buildings. And each building has one guard on it who checks on the building from time to time. We'll get into that soon too. But there's no guard in the building all day. They kind of hang outside playing on their phones. It's absolutely fucking insane. So I get into this building, and the doors are open from 6:30. The you're not locked in your cell from 6:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night. And the building is open. You can go to different floors and stuff like that all day until 7:30 at night. And the building itself is open from 8:30 a.m. to 11. Then they close for lunch. And then from 1:30 to 4:30, and then they close basically for the night. You're in your building, but you can still go from floor to floor and whatever. So I get in there and I see, everybody's smoking pot and doing coke and smoking cigarettes, and everybody has a phone. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? This is not how I pictured jail. It's very third world though. It's very dirty. It's very, I'm not racist at all. I'm the only white guy there. That's it. I'm it. Everybody's staring at me,
What are you wearing?
Crocs and shorts and a t-shirt, a tank top.
Your clothes that you came in with still?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've heard about that in a lot of foreign countries.
Yeah, there's no prison issue clothes.
Yeah, you just get kept with that the whole time there.
Yeah, and people could drop off clothes and stuff like that. So I say to Roy, I say, well, is there any way I could get a phone? He said, yeah, you could buy a phone, you could buy a phone, but just know that the cops catch you. Not only are you going to get the phone taken, but you're going to go in the hole, and the real hole. All right. So, but Roy said, look, I'll help with that whole situation. We'll have, a hiding spot, and when the cops are called in the building, when the cops come in the building, everybody screams Leo, or, wearing that that the cops are in the building. All right, so get me a phone, So he gets me a phone from whoever had one at the time, not from one of the drug dealers, because that would have taken a few days. I wanted a phone then because I had to call my kids, I had to call my mom, I had to call my wife at the time. And so I got a phone rather quickly, and I started making phone calls, and it was very high pressure, because even if the guard was to come in the building once, it was hang up the phone, put it away, pretend you're jerking off, and that's the way it was. Now, I'll show you a picture also. One of the things I also saw is all the inmates, they carried around these fucking machetes. The size of my arm, that they would make out of the beds, the bunk beds. So they would cut off a piece of the metal and they would file it down and make these big machetes and then wrap it with the elastic from your underwear at the bottom, it's a handle. It was fucking wild, man. So I'm and again, I've never been in prison, so I'm really intimidated by this, because all I'm looking at is violence, and I look different than everybody else, and I don't speak the language. So if I wanted to understand anything, Roy had to translate for me, but at the same time, he's not going to be there all the time. He works for the kitchen or whatever it was. And I don't even trust Roy, because Roy's in jail. The story with Roy was part of this organized crime syndicate drug syndicate in New York. He did 14 years federal time, and he murdered people. He did 14 years federal time and got deported back to Dominican Republic, and then was in Dominican Republic for 5 years, hit his daughter or something, and then got 10 years in DR. So am I supposed to trust this fucking guy? From what I know at this point. And
you're not even sentenced or anything, just mixed in with all these people.
I'm preventative.
Yeah.
So here's a little fact. In DR, so in this jail, it was called Nahio 20. In Nahio 20, there were 800, just shy of 800 inmates. 500 of them are pretrial, preventative. So these people haven't even been to trial yet. And everybody's mixed in. So not only was I sharing a room with him, but I was also sharing a cell with a guy that was doing 30 for murder. There was no separation, I was bringing vape pens, So now I get a phone, and I could at least call my mother. I could at least call my kids. I could call my ex-wife, and we were starting to have a lot of problems. So I'm freaking out, and I don't know what to do, and I don't have any access to money, because my soon-to-be ex-wife at that time was basically hoarding it because she didn't know what was going on. And so I was calling my mother. My mother got diagnosed with cancer, and she was starting her thing soon. So I didn't know what to do. I was completely lost. I tried to call a few friends that I trusted, and there were 17 vendors that sent stuff in that pallet. Now, just to give you a broad overview, and we're getting into the story, obviously, not one of them during the entire time that I was there picked up the phone, called my mother, or answered my calls when I did finally get their number, or say to my ex-wife or my mother, you know what, here's $5,000. He's in there because of our shit. Let's get him the fuck out of there. That didn't happen. So my mother, you know, my mother's 73 years old. She runs her business, but she's not wealthy. She's, you know, she just manages, you know, that's what she does, you know? So she doesn't have a ton of money, but my mother's an absolute rock star. So she didn't even like pay attention to her own cancer. She was more consumed with the fact that I was in fucking jail in the third world. So we go to, so now days are going by and I'm counting the days till this next court, you know? And the embassy finally comes about 2 or 3 weeks into me being in this new prison. These two guys come, and one is going to be my regular rep. His name is Jose, who's a Dominican citizen, but I think he has dual citizenship. He speaks English. He knows kind of the world over there, but he's Dominican. And, you know, he's kind of like, I forget what his position was, but he's like kind of, he works for the embassy, but he's kind of the intermediary between Americans and Dominicans that are locked up. So he brings another person who's American, who's white, you know, who's like an American. And they sit down, and I'm literally bawling my eyes out, crying to them, saying, what are you guys going to do? You know, how could you guys have to help me. I told them the whole story. I said, you know, I don't have a record. I'm a taxpayer in the United, I run a straight business. You know, I don't know what to do. So they say, well, we can't do anything. All we could do is that we can't interfere with this country because it's an independent nation. And all we could basically do is come here, make sure you're not getting hurt, you're not getting mistreated, and make sure that the legal process goes according to the legal process. So I'm alone. You know, I'm alone. I got, and they brought me this little bag, and it had like hotel soaps. I never forget this. It had hotel soaps, and it had like a deodorant, like a small trial size deodorant, and like a roll of toilet paper. And I looked at the guy, and I was like, I don't want your fucking toilet paper, man. I can get my own toilet paper. I need your help. Well, we can't do anything. We can't do anything. Now, just to pause for a second. Did you hear during COVID about these 3 Haitian green card holders in the United States?
I don't think so.
Okay. So there were these 3 Haitian brothers who moved to America with their father. They were in Florida. And during COVID, they went to Santo Domingo for like a vacation. This is the story. They rented a car. They went to a gas station. The gas station saw something underneath the car, called the cops. Cops showed up. They found 3 pounds of weed underneath the car. Got arrested. The father called up a congresswoman or a news reporter or whatever it may be, but it got on the news and a congresswoman got involved. These 3 kids were out of jail in 2 weeks. But that's a congresswoman in the State Department. So why can't the embassy help me? Right or wrong? So I tell this to the embassy. Well, there were different circumstances with that. What different circumstances? They got caught red-handed with drugs. I was signing for a package and didn't know what the fuck was mine. Well, they're claiming that wasn't theirs and it was under the car when they rented it and this, that, and the other. Well, I'm not claiming anything. You saw me sign for a package that wasn't even addressed to me. It was addressed to my vendors, attention to my group. So why can't you help me? And I'm begging for their help. We'll see what we can do. It's in the checks in the mail type of thing. And so I figure out that in jail, especially for a gringo, everything's money. Everything. And it's not like it's a ton of money. So they sell, there's drug dealers and stuff like that, and they sell everything. But they have little 100 peso bags of cocaine. I don't know if you know, the peso, 100 pesos is like $1.50, but every time somebody, did something, anything, picked up a cigarette for you had to give them 100 pesos worth of cocaine. That's how it was, because I was a gringo. And I was so their impression, I don't know if you know this, but their impression of the United States is, if you're from America, you're rich. That's just the way it is. Everything, you go to America and there's just trees with money on them, and that's what you do, and that's how it is. So everybody looks at the gringo to kind of milk him for everything he's worth. And this is not just other inmates. This is lawyers, and this is judges, and this is everybody. So at this point, everything I want to do costs money. If I wanted to buy a pack of cigarettes, not only were the cigarettes more expensive for me, but I had to get somebody to go get me the cigarettes, which also cost me money. So everything was money, and I had to pay somebody to take my phone when they called that the cops were in the building, and I had to pay somebody to hand wash my clothes because they didn't have any washers or dryers, and I had to pay somebody, to clean the room, and I had to pay somebody. Everything was just money and money and money. So I'm having a lot of problems with my ex-wife, soon-to-be ex-wife at the time, and she's talking about money and this, that, and the other. So the story is she hacks into my social media accounts and sees things that she wasn't supposed to see. And in my opinion, she uses this as a scapegoat to leave. So not only does she leave, but she calls up my friends and my vendors and my buyers and just tells them that I'm the biggest fucking dirtbag in the world because I supposedly cheated on her and this, that, and the third. Now, mind you, my lawyer is friends of that family, right? So I'm faced with the fact that I'm getting divorced, and that's tough to swallow, but it is what it is at this point, right? I have no choice. It is what it is. My concern is getting home to my kids. So now my ex-wife cuts off all communication with me, and her stepfather takes over. So in my ex-wife's family, it's a hierarchy. The father and the mother are the bosses. Even when we were married, they say jump, you say how high, and that's just the way it is. They're European, so that's, I guess, the culture. So now the stepfather doesn't allow me to talk to my lawyer directly. He has to be the intermediary between me and my lawyer. And that got awkward real fast, I mean, not only did it get awkward, he don't like me because I cheated on his baby, or his daughter, but now he has to kind of inconvenience himself to be the intermediary between me and my lawyer. But I told him, I said, let me talk to my fucking lawyer, stay out of it. Well, he doesn't want to talk to you directly. I'm going to talk to him, you're going to talk to me, and I'll answer any questions. This is how it was. So this made me more anxious because not only do I not understand the language and I'm in this place and I'm being extorted and threatened by everybody, but I can't even talk to my fucking lawyer. So me and him have a huge blow up one day through text messaging. And I said, fuck you. I'm getting another attorney. I can't live like this. And I kind of knew this was building up. So I started talking to this guy. His name was Santana, right? Right, like every other one. And he tells me that he has the ability for $50,000 to make a deal with the judge, to make a deal with the prosecutor, and all this goes away at my next hearing. Okay. So my next hearing's like 2 days away, so I don't have time to do it then, so I would have to do it the next one or whatever it is. So my next hearing gets there, the 2 months are up, and my bus to the court was 2 hours late, so they postponed it. Right. For another 2 months.
It was another 2 months?
Yeah. So now I'm fighting with Johnny. I get this guy Santana who's putting this shit in my head that I'm getting out. I'm getting out. So he tells this guy Santana, now my mother and me and like we're on this mission to raise this 50 grand because we don't have it. You know, like we don't have it. We're already into Johnny, the first lawyer, for like 30 that I had. You know, that I came up with between my mother and me or whatever it is, you know, before me and my ex-wife started fighting, she put in some of the money I had. And now it's another 50. So we're running all over the place. Now, you can't do, I don't know if you know this, but you can't do a wire from America to Dominican Republic. You can, but it takes 2 weeks. There's no instant wiring system. It's a third world fucking country, so the banking system is third world also. So if I wire it today, it's going to get there a week from next Tuesday. You know, like that's how it is. So not only do we have to figure out how to get the money, we had to figure out how to get the money there. So we figured out that we could send Western Union, but we can't send Western Union. We can't send 50 grand Western Union. That can't happen. We have to send $1,000 50 times, or $1,500 50 fucking 30 times. So now not only are we begging people for money, but we're trying to find people to go with my mother to Western Union to send the fucking money. So now, if my timeline's correct, it's somewhere 2 months. It's like November, right, of last year. And
of 2024.
23.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 23. And the date's approaching and we finally get the money. And we get 25 fucking people to send Western Union. So my mother comes here. My mother comes to the DR. And she brings the last 10,000 because you could bring 10,000 on a plane without them saying anything. So she brings the last 10,000 and meets the attorney. The attorney says, everything's done. We got to deal with the judges. We got to deal with the lawyer. We got to deal with the prosecutor. We're paying them the money. Everything's Gucci. My court date comes. My bus is 2 hours late again. And my lawyer's not at the court when we get there. And he told my mother that he doesn't want that judge, or he wanted a different something happened where he even wanted to postpone it. So now I don't have my lawyer with me, and they're trying to explain to me in Spanish that it's getting postponed, but not only getting postponed, it's getting postponed till January 15th. So now I'm missing Christmas with my kids and my son and my kids' birthdays. So I am absolutely fucking hysterical. And I get back to the jail and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? You know, like, I don't understand what's happening here. So my mother comes to DR she finishes her chemo and she comes to DR for 6 weeks. She wanted to kind of be there, and she wanted to figure out everything, and she wanted to basically be there with through the holidays, for me. So 2 days after the court appearance, I see this thing on Instagram. And now, remember the guard I told you about at the first prison that was nice to me? He referred me Santana. And he said he's going to get you out. But I see this thing on Instagram and I didn't know what it. So, when you put a picture on and it has like words in the picture, you can't use Google Translate to translate that. So I'm trying to figure out how to translate that. And Roy wasn't around. And I see this and something didn't look kosher about this. So long story short, it turns out that Santana dies with my 50 grand.
Does he actually die? Or you don't know to this
My
day?
16-year-old thinks he never died. But I know people that went to his funeral. I know people that say he didn't die either. So I don't know if he I to this day, don't know if he dies. So now we have no money and we're back at fucking square one, don't have a lawyer. And we're only 3.5 months into this thing, So
could have just paid the prosecutor off with that 50 grand.
That's what
side of good faith.
Right. But, hindsight's 20/20, So now I'm sitting there and I don't know what to do because we've milked a lot of cows to get the 50 grand. And I don't know, number one, where we're going to get the money. And number two, who we're going to use to represent us. And number three, what the next steps are. Is my deal even still in place with the judges and the lawyers and all this nonsense because now this guy's dead? Am I going to get to the court in January and this is all going to go away because he has this deal in place? Or did he, number one, steal the money, or the judges or the lawyers stole the money and told me to go fuck off because now this guy's dead and there's no proof of anything because everything was cash? So it's really close to Christmas and my mother's there and she's coming. I got special permission from the director at the time, who was this lady that said my mother could come as much as she wanted. So she naturally came every day because she was in Dominican Republic for me. So every day if she wasn't going to interview lawyers, she would come to me. She would have to hire a driver and she had a translator at the time that she would have to pay. And she would come to see me. So I'm going upstairs one day to see her. And so I told you, there's 4 buildings. And the building across from me on the top floor, there's a maximum security section. But it's not maximum security because they did more extreme crimes, because again, I was with murderers that were doing 30. There was maximum security because it was just more publicized, or more in the eye of the public. So it was more protection for them, the prisoner, than it was for whatever. And those maximum security inmates were governed by these agents who were all dressed in black. Like you could tell, like there were security guards who handled the general public. And then there were these agents who were all dressed in black. They were like special agents who handled those guys. So there's like 4 or 5 of them upstairs. And that was normal, so I saw them. I always say hello or hola. And I said hello and they turn around and they say, "What's your name?" And I told them my name. I thought it was just in passing. And my mother's not there yet. And they say, "Turn around." And they put me in handcuffs. Now, to preface this, while we're doing all this, we're writing letters to anybody that will listen, congressmen and, more of the embassy and TV, the news. Like we're just trying to get somebody to listen to us and help us at this point. And I even wrote a few emails from my phone thinking that I'm writing emails to the U.S. government, so they're not going to tell on me that I have a phone in the third world country, right? You would think. So they tell me, they put handcuffs on me, and 6 of them are now walking with me, and I don't know where I'm going, but it looks like I'm going towards my cell. I said, where is my mother? I'm here for a visit for my mother. It's just standard protocol, standard protocol, standard protocol. So we go to my cell, and I hid my phone with a friend upstairs, my drug dealer friend upstairs, because I didn't have anybody to watch my phone, so I gave it to him. So my phone wasn't in my cell. So they bring me to my cell, and they're tearing apart my cell. Where's the phone? Where's the phone? Where's the phone? I said, I don't have a fucking phone. There's no phone in there. So they can't find the phone, but the story is that supposedly, you know who Chuck Schumer is?
Yeah.
So we wrote Chuck Schumer, and supposedly Chuck Schumer's office contacted somebody there and supposedly said I wrote an email, and that's where they got the idea that I had a fucking phone. Oh. So now they put me in observation again. Now, they didn't put me in the maximum security because I had a problem with the guy in there, and this was a punishment because they think I have a phone, but they can't find it. But they can't put me in the hole because they can't prove I have a phone. So they put me in this observation where all the new inmates go to be observed. So now I'm in observation, and I'm in this little small room, and there's 30 other guys in there, and I don't know them, and none of them speak English. So I don't have a phone. I get my hands on one of these little phones, like the jail phones. Like, you remember the old Nokia phones?
Yeah, I used to have one.
Yeah, I get my hands on one of those to call my mother. So we're interviewing attorneys, and I can't really speak to my mother much because we're taking turns on the phone, and we're interviewing attorneys, and I don't have much feedback. And at the time, my mother called my father, and he's getting involved because now he has to help me with money to get a new attorney, right? So I get my hands on these Nokia phones, and I'm talking to my mother and my kids once a day. That's what I'm getting, you know? Meanwhile, before that, I was talking to them. I was talking to my kids 2-3 times a day, and I was talking to my mother, 100 times a day, because she was really her and my best friend, Steph, are the only people that I could really open up to. I can't open up to my kids because my kids, my oldest son at the time knew I was in jail, but he's a really anxious kid, so I can't make him worry, right? And my 12-year-old, 10 at the time, he didn't even know I was in jail. We told him that I was having a problem with my passport, so he thinks I'm chilling in a resort, just waiting for my passport to get fixed. So I can't open up to them. So I really only have my mother, and I have my best friend. And maybe, a few other people, every so often I would speak to. So my mother and my father end up hiring this, I guess you would call him a Fifth Avenue attorney in America, yeah. But this really high-priced attorney who I didn't like. I met him once. I didn't like him, but they were kind of this is the best, so let's just get the best, and let's give him 30 grand, and let's just get him the fuck out of here, right? So they hired this lawyer, and the lawyer calls the jail and somehow after 6 days, gets me out of observation. So I get back to my jail cell, and I'm charging my phone in the front. So there's this, I guess you want to call it a living room area, but there's no couches or anything. There's just a TV and whatever. There's concrete slabs that you sit on. And I'm charging my phone. I walk away for a minute and come back, and my phone's gone. So somebody steals my phone. And they tell me they stole my phone, and they're extorting me for 5,000 pesos, which is $100. But it wasn't the fact about the $100. It was just that somebody's fucking extorting me for money now, or more, and doing it right to my face. So now I get my phone back and they have these, so there's no outlets in the cells because there's no reason for an outlet in a cell, right? But there are these fans, or if you're lucky, you get a fan. But Roy had a fan. And it's fucking hot. It's even hot. Like when I left, it was 90 degrees there. It's hot. And there's no air conditioning. And have you ever sweat to the point where it hurts?
I don't know about sweat.
No, you sweat and it hurts. Like it feels like pins and needles almost. It's really terrible. This is what goes on. So there's this fan, and in the fan, there's obviously like the wires to hook up the fan. There wasn't an outlet, but there were like copper wires to hook up the fan. So they learned that if you extended the copper wires outside of the fan while the fan was running, you could buy copper wire on the black market of the jail, like a spool of copper wire, and you could wrap that copper wire in garbage bags, right? And connect it to like a plug, like a block, and have a cable, and that will charge your phone, right? This is a fucking fire hazard waiting to happen. I didn't even want to touch the thing.
We did crazy shit to charge it in the feds too.
Right.
In like the seal
What
lights
you do,
like
though?
this. Yeah.
Was it similar to what I just explained?
Yeah. And then the MP3 player would be like the federal MP3 player they would sell, like the SanDisk.
Really?
Would be the connector piece that you had to plug into that, which that then plugged into the light.
But
that was like the conduit.
But that was a legal item?
The MP3 player was legal, but the guys at the factory would convert it into this contraband charger. The cell phone was illegal.
Okay.
But the reason why they didn't have iPhones there was because you can't take an iPhone battery pack out. So
Right.
if you charge the battery separately, it gets popped. You pay $400 for a new battery rather than $4,000 for a new phone.
Right. I get it. So now we have these chargers, and I buy one to put in my room. But now, if they call Leo, if they call that the cops are coming in, it's an extra step. You know, it's like you have to disconnect the phone, you have to pull the fucking thing down, and sometimes there will be sparks flying everywhere. It's all fucked up. And meanwhile, every time they call Leo, I don't know what the cops are coming in for. I'm shitting my pants because now I have to move this and give it to people and all this, that, and the other. Now I'm paranoid because if I give it to somebody, it might get stolen again. So now, where am I? I lost my train of thought.
With the phone charger and then the law enforcement running in.
Yeah, so the law enforcement runs in. So I find people. I'm paying more people to go, to take my phone. Now, the way it worked was my mother would send Roy, my friend, his family money, and Roy's family would put it in my commissary, or just send it to the drug dealer who I had to pay. So they didn't have cash at the jail. They had tickets. So even if I was to get cash, I couldn't use it. I had to get tickets. So what we would do is we would send the money to the drug dealers because they had a lot of tickets, because everybody would pay with their commissary tickets to buy drugs. So we would have to pay the drug dealers because I was buying cigarettes because they didn't have any vape in there, which were illegal. Cigarettes were illegal. Everything was illegal. And so I would buy the cigarettes from the drug dealers, but I would also buy drugs for everybody who was helping me. It was costing me $200-300 a week to even fucking be there. And now I'm paying for protection. I'm doing the whole bit. So we're shopping for attorney. We have the attorney. Great. And now the attorney he's expensive, but he's not corrupt. He's not paying judges. He's not paying lawyers. He's not doing anything. He's getting me off because he's a fucking great attorney. And my whole thought process is, I don't really give a fuck if he's a great attorney. Just get me the fuck home to my kids. So I would call the attorney. And I'm not going to lie and say I didn't call the attorney too much. But again, it was the only person I could fucking talk to who I semi-trusted, because And I had a lot of questions because I really didn't know the system. I didn't know the process. I didn't know the system. I didn't know why I was still there. I didn't know anything. So I would call the attorney and he would kind of tell me, this is what we think is going to happen. And we think you could be out by like June. I was like, fucking June. Fucking June, that's a year, like what the fuck, June, I want to go home. I'm here for 4 or 5 months already. I want to go home. So we're putting together a strategy and he's doing all his research, he builds files, does all this bullshit. And I get into an argument with him and I'm like, I don't think you're the guy for me, because he basically is telling me not to call him. Like, just, this is what the deal is and just wait. I was like, get me out of here. I need to be out of here. I'm being threatened every day. I did, I feel unsafe. I'm not eating. There were days where I would just pass out. Like I would just almost get to the point of pass out because I wasn't eating. I was living off of Oreos and potato chips that I was buying from the commissary. There was no protein in my diet. And it was like, there were days that I couldn't get out of bed because I didn't have enough energy to get out of bed. Like I wasn't eating at all. I wasn't drinking. The jail didn't have running water. So the jail would put on the water 2 times a day, in the morning at like 6:30 in the morning, and then at night for 10 minutes each. Now, during that time, all the Dominicans would run in the shower room and shower. First of all, I'm not taking a shower with 40 Dominicans that have 14-inch cocks slapping all over the place. That's not happening either. So I opted to take a shower by myself with a bucket. Right? So we had to gather buckets of water anyway because we had to flush down the toilet because the toilets weren't flushing. So it was just, there was no water, So now we're planning or whatever it is, and they're saying May, June, and I'm getting scared because I don't want to be here for another 3 months, 4 months, 5 months at this point. So I said, I'm getting rid of you. Right? So I fired that lawyer. And my father allocated or somehow got his hands on 50 grand for me to do it. Now, this guy had 30. So this other lady comes along and her name was Capion. And she comes along and she says, well, I know the lawyers and I know the prosecutors and I know the judges. Again, with the same fucking, story, everybody's corrupt. We're all going to get out of this easy peasy. And if you give me 30 grand, no, first it was $10,000. I'll get you out. Next court appearance, you're out. So he said, all right, let's do that. I said, find out exactly what the deal is and let's move forward. So she calls me up and she's like, what they'll do is they'll do an agreement with you where you can get out now, but have to come back to the country every month or 2 and sign, right? Kind of like good behavior or early release or whatever it is. And that'll be like 12 or 15 grand. But if you want to go home, it's going to be 30. And stay home. So we had no way to get the money. So we said, all right, here's the 12 or 15 grand. Just get me that and I'll come back every month or 2 and just sign and leave. All right. So we get to court and I meet this other attorney who's willing to take the case for like 5 grand. And he's a really nice guy. Like he understands my case. He's younger. He's maybe a little newer, but he understands my case. And Capion wanted to work in the background either. She didn't want to be in front of the judge. She just wanted to orchestrate the deals. So we hired this other guy who doesn't know anything about Capion, and he builds the case to make the argument to put on the show in front of the judge. So we get to court and Capion's there, but just kind of standing with my mother in the background. and the translator's there and my lawyer's there. And we finally get to see the judge. And the judge, and nothing happens. The judge just fucking postpones it again. So now I'm literally looking at 9 months of postponement without even getting to see a judge or being heard or anything like that. So they postponed it. And now I realize Caprion's full of shit and I just lost another $12,000. So we say, fuck it. I'm going to stick with this guy who's young. I trust him. He understands the case. He knows how to argue it. So we go with this guy and I'm talking, and like, he's even nice to the point where he would like text me every day. You know, like, are you okay? You know, is everything okay? You know, could I do anything? You know, could I bring you any money? Or, you know, like, he was just nice. He would get on the phone with my mother who had to get friends because she doesn't know how to use Google Translate or WhatsApp. So she would have to call, you know, go to her friend's house who spoke Spanish to call this guy 3 times a week just to appease me, to tell me that everything's going the way it should be going. So we finally get to, after butts and butts and butts, we finally get to, now it's February of 24, and we finally get to my court date. This was pre-trial. We're going pre-trial. We're going to be heard in front of a judge, and the judge should be throwing this out. I should be able to go home now. So now the judge, my lawyer, argues the points. We have my mother there. My mother's sitting bald with cancer, right? So there has to be some sympathy. My lawyer's there. I'm crying hysterical in court. And my lawyer's arguing. And my lawyer and the judge says, we're going to trial. Going to trial for international narcotics trafficking. So now it's setting in that I might be, like, I'm facing 20 years. That's what I'm facing. That's the charge. I'm being charged with the same criminal acts as somebody smuggling cocaine from Colombia to Dominican Republic. That's what I'm facing. So now they don't give you a trial date there. They say, go back to jail and fucking wait for a trial date. That's how it is. So now we start panicking, you know, because not only do I not have a trial date, but I'm facing a really long sentence and we're writing more people. So we write the president of Dominican Republic, who I research, who grew up, who is educated in the United States. He went to Harvard. He speaks English. So I write him a letter and send it to my father, who's going to send it to him. So it doesn't come from me because I don't have an illegal phone. So I write him a letter and I kind of forget about it for a couple of weeks because I don't hear anything. One Sunday morning, I'm sitting in bed and they say, someone's here to visit you. I say, well, my mother's not here. I don't have anybody here visiting me. Who's here? I go upstairs and 2 colonels, like presidential colonels, are standing there and they start talking to me. And we're talking through Google Translate because they don't speak English. And they're like, I tell them my story. They have my file. And I tell them my story. And they were like, all right, we'll see if we could help you. Now, that was the first and last time I saw them or heard from them. So now it's February and I have no idea when I'm going to trial. I lost a lot of confidence in my attorney because we're going to trial and I don't know what to do. You know, like, I'm at wit's end with this whole thing. So here comes this guy, Jose, who's another lawyer, right? And Jose's a real used car salesman. Like, he's just creme de la creme car salesman. And he's promising the world over to my mother and to me. And we're hysterical, so we don't know what to do either. And he says that he'll get me a very similar to deal that Capellan's going to get me, where I would have to come back to DR. I'd go home right away, but I would have to come back to DR every month or 2 months just to sign, and I could even take the same day flight back. Easy peasy. Fine, do it. Let's do it. How much is it? So without drawing the story out even longer, we raise the money. We send the money. My mother brings money. The same thing. And I hear, a couple months pass, and finally I hear that we're going to trial on July 3rd. July 3rd. So now we're a year and a month in. Right? So now again, I don't know whether I should be trusting this guy Jose either, because he's just another out of the 7 or 8 attorneys I have by now. He's just another guy preaching the same fucking thing. I still have my original attorney, the nice guy, but I'm using this guy kind of as let's back up type of thing. So, but with that being said, the embassy made arrangements because I was always late for court. The embassy made arrangements for me to go to that jail that I first got locked up in because it was 5 minutes away from the court the day before. So with that being said, the day before, I was nervous. Don't get me wrong, Ian. But I had a little sense of calm because I knew it was finally coming to a head. You understand what I'm saying? I was going to court. I was going to be on time for court. I supposedly had this deal and it was going to be over. No matter what, it was going to be over, right? So I get to court. My mother's standing there. My mother's driver's standing there. And my lawyer's standing there. My lawyer tells me, we're in the courtroom. My lawyer tells my other lawyer that we're not going to have you represent him, and he's not going to represent me, but we want a district attorney. No, a public defender to represent me. And he knows this public defender. And we're there. We're at trial, we're there. So there's 3 judges. In Dominican Republic, there's no jury. So there's 3 judges. Instead, there's 2 women and there's a guy. Now, I'm thinking to myself, in the back, they give the opportunity to appoint this public defender that my crooked lawyer knows. And in the back of my head, I'm saying to myself, I'm sitting here crying. My mother's crying. I have to get the 2 women. The 2 women have to be on my side. They have to be mothers. They have to be they have to have some sort of sympathy or empathy that this whole story is happening. So I'm hoping that I'm going to get their votes for me to go home. So the judge comes out. The judges come out, and the prosecutor gets up and makes some opening statement and says, this is what the guy did. It's very clear that he's not trafficking drugs. He did something wrong, but he didn't know he didn't know that he was doing anything wrong because he told his vendors not to ship anything. And please the court, give him mercy. That's the prosecutor saying this. They call 3 witnesses, and my lawyer's obviously saying the same thing. They call 3 witnesses. They call the shipping company, the guy who drove the truck. Now, these are all prosecution witnesses. They call 2 DNCD agents who arrested me. The first witness was a DNCD agent that came out and basically testified to the fact that when they arrested me, I was completely caught by surprise and had no idea what the fuck was going on. Then the judges took a recess for the case to the next day because I guess it was getting long, whatever it was. All right. So they bring me back to my jail, my cell. So am I going to be late the next day? I don't know what the fuck's going to happen. So long story short, they make sure I get to court on time. So I get to court on time. They call the shipping. No, they call 4 witnesses. They called the shipping company, the guy who was the shipping company, and he comes in and he says, I spoke to the guy once because he spoke to my employees and my ex-wife to arrange shipping. I wasn't handling the shipping. They were just coordinating amongst themselves. I was just doing admin. I was doing my job as the company owner to arrange a show. So they were handling the shipping. He said, I spoke to the guy once. He paid an invoice for the taxes, and that was basically it. He had no idea what was going on this whole time. And when we got there, because he was there when they arrested me, when we got there, he was completely caught by surprise. He had no idea what the fuck's going on. Then they interviewed the guy who handles the dogs at the airport. And he basically said, it came through U.S. Customs. It went here the legal way. The dog sniffed it out, but it wasn't that hard to find since everything was fucking labeled like it was being sold in a store. It wasn't in baggies or what, it was, they were in like display packs, it said Delta 8 on the fucking, on the label. It was very clear that, he wasn't trying to hide anything. He was just, they were just trying to ship samples to a resort that was never going to leave the resort, that never had any non-U.S. citizens there, So he testified for me. And then the second cop testified for me as well and said the same thing. So now all the witnesses are called. And the 3 judges go in the back. And my heart went into my balls at this point because I don't know what's going on. So I'm talking to the translator and I'm saying, what do you think? My mom's saying to my mother, what do you think? I'm asking the lawyer, the judge, the public defender, what does he think? And we're all like, I pled guilty because I knew I was going to get this deal. And my lawyer, the public defender, is saying, "Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. This, that, and the other. This is what we're doing." But my translator thought something else, and my mother didn't know what to think. She was hysterical. Also,
what was the maximum penalty? Did they tell you?
20 years.
It was 20 years.
Yeah, it was 20 years. So they come out about 15 minutes later. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life, And they start talking. And the guy talks first. And the guy said, the first words out of his mouth said, I want to let you go today, but they don't. I'm like, oh shit. And he says, and they all make their individual speeches basically saying the same thing. Look, you did something really wrong, but this is a first because if foreigners came here selling drugs, we've locked those people up. And we knew they were drug dealers, and they knew they were drug dealers. But you're not a drug dealer. And you don't have a criminal record. And you have kids. And you have, we had all this paperwork. My kids' birth certificates were there. We had everything there. But we have to give you a punishment. We have to punish you for doing something wrong in this country. So they gave me 18 months.
With 12 months time served already?
Right. I have 12 and a half months. So at this point, obviously I'm facing 20 years, so I'm happy. I mean, I'm not happy that I'm not going home today, but I'm happy that this is going to end. And
you have closure.
Right. And I have closure. Exactly.
The worst thing is being in limbo before sentencing when you're just stuck in prison without an end date.
Right. For 13 months, for close to 13 months in a third world, And so now I'm a giant flirt, if I'm not, if I'm not morbidly depressed like I was for the 12 and a half months, I'm a giant flirt. Even my 12-year-old is though. But like, you know, I flirt with everybody. I'm very personable. You know, I like to laugh. You know, I'm a very happy person. So I felt some sort of closure and some sort of relief. So on the bus back, it's a funny story. So on the bus back to the jail, so it was my jail, right? And next to my jail was another jail, men's facility. But next to that men's facility was a female jail. And there was this really hot Dominican girl on the bus. So my mother gets me pizza from across the street. They allowed her to give me pizza. So I'm offering the girl pizza, and I end up sitting next to her, and we start flirting back and forth with the limited Spanish I know. And turns out that this girl, you know, she liked American guys, and we were flirting back and forth. I was touching her leg. She was touching my leg. It was the greatest day of my last year. You know, flirting. I got closure. I'm going home. It might not be today, but I'm going home. So now we're going home. We're going back to the jail, and we get back there. My mother has to go back to New York a couple days later. But there's still a glimmer of hope that I get out sooner because you could file for like an early release. Now, the worst case scenario in an early release is that I have to stay in the country, right? I might have to stay in the country for the 5 months I have left, but at least I won't be in that. So now this happens, and I'm laying in bed one night, and I hear people going crazy, right? Supposedly there was this guy that had a cell in the next building, and he was this big dude. He had to be like 6'8". He was ginormous. They called him Captain. And he had a disagreement with one of his cellmates about the fan in his room. So he planned this elaborate story. He planned this elaborate plan that when they locked the doors at 10:30, he had his machete and he was going to kill this guy. So not only did he kill this guy, but his other cellmate tried to stop it, and he killed him too. It took him 25 minutes to get down to the cell, to get this guy out of the cell with two bodies in his room to get, you know, to bring him wherever he was going. So that happened, and I'm more scared because this is just another murder that's happening here, and there's been multiple murders. I mean, I saw a prisoner get beat up in front of me by the guards. Like, I don't know what to do. So now I'm like, all right, worst case scenario is I get in front of a judge. They put me in an apartment here. I could live in an Airbnb for a couple months. I won't see my kids, but at least I'll be able to FaceTime them, and I won't be in jail, and it'll be better than it is now, right? So that dicks around. We dick around with that for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's just more and more apparent that that's not going to happen, and I'm going to have to ride out my 5 months. So I'm facing the fact that I have to ride out the 5 months, and I do. So, but at the same time, I'm a lot more relaxed because it's coming to an end, man. You know, like it's coming to an end. So every morning I would wake up. My day was like this. Every morning I would wake up and I would text my kids. And my kids would wake up later because when I first got arrested, my older son, who has extreme anxiety, he had to be taken out of school because he couldn't deal with it. So we took him out of school and put him online school. So we took him on. So I would text him, and he's literally not sleeping at night. I wouldn't even get a phone call from him till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I knew I would speak to my mother in the morning. So I knew I would speak to him later. And I would speak to my mother in the morning, and my son, my 12-year-old, I would message him also, and I was talking to him in the morning before school, but now as I told you in the hallway, my kids moved to Florida because my ex-wife wasn't getting child support for me because I had no way to give it to her. So she moved to Florida, and the district that my 12-year-old was going to started getting bomb threats. So they took him out of school also. So now both my kids are doing online school. So they're waking up a little later than normal because they could, right? So I now I text my kids in the morning. I call my mother in the morning. I wake up, I have breakfast in my room. I have oatmeal. I discover there's oatmeal. And I discover that if you put oatmeal in a bowl, but we only had hot water because we only had water dispenser. So we had hot water that we'd have to pour like water in and it comes out hot. But if you put like cocoa in that, and you put peanut butter in that, it gives you protein and it's filling and it's actually really tasty. So that's what I would eat, right? So I would eat that and I would go outside and I would walk from like 8:30 in the morning to 11. I would just walk around the basketball court and I would talk to the guards, like I would talk to whatever. And then at 11 o'clock, I would go in because they would lock down, and then till about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and I would go out and walk again. So while I was walking, there was this guard. His name was Martinez. Surprise, surprise. And he turns around one day, and he was like on the newer side, like he was transferred from another prison. And he was and the woman director left. So there was this other director who was really supposedly a hard ass, but I got along with him because he knew I shouldn't be there. And this guy Martinez asks me for $1 million pesos. $1 million pesos is like 17 grand or 18 grand. I was like, number one, I don't have $1 million pesos. And if I had $1 million pesos, I'm not giving it to you. So he doesn't ask me once. He doesn't ask me twice. He asks me 3 times. He tells me to go fuck my mother. And he tells me that I'm cheap. I'm a cheap gringo. So I go to the director and I said, I'm being harassed by this fucking guy. He's asking me for money. What do I do? And the director who referred me to the subdirector told me he'll handle it. But again, they're a band of brothers just like the NYPD, so I don't know if they're going to handle it. And I feel threatened by this guy. So I call up the embassy. The embassy, that's the one thing the embassy did was get involved in this, because this was just blatantly illegal. So the embassy calls up the director, and the director gets involved, and I don't see Martinez anymore. So Martinez ends up coming back, but he was told that he wasn't allowed to talk to me or look at me. So that's fine. That's easy peasy. So now I'm riding out the last 5 months, and I'm walking and I'm waiting, and I'm walking and I'm waiting, and the kids are just like, now I'm at the point where I would call my kids up, and every day, we're inside 3 months now, and every day I would call my 12-year-old up, and I would say, guess how many days? Guess what today is? And I would say 90 days or 60 days or 59 days, and every day was the same thing. And again, my 12-year-old doesn't know I'm in jail. So my 12-year-old thinks that daddy gets his passport back in 90 days or whatever it may be. And like things are a lot lighter. So now 3 weeks before this, the embassy stopped seeing me because I only have 2 months left, and their job is done because I'm going home, right? They call me about a month after their last visit, which means I have about a month left. And they say, do you have your passport? I was like, my mother has my passport. Well, we're going to issue you a new passport. Like, what do you mean you're going to issue me a passport? My passport's fine. I did the research. My passport's fine. We're going to issue one because you were in prison for 18 months or whatever it was. So I was like, well, all right, so issue me a passport. But I didn't feel comfortable with that because it didn't make sense, right? I even called up like the State Department and said, does this make sense? And they were like, well, if your passport's good, your passport's good. So I find out, fast forward about a week, I get a call from a marshal at the State Department in Dominican Republic. And he says, you have something pending in Georgia. So right before, I told you I produce conventions. So right before COVID, I had this convention in Atlanta. And I had a balance with the convention center. And I wrote them a check. And that check bounced. And COVID happened and I forgot about it. So apparently this guy filed criminal charges against me in the state of Georgia. So now I'm finally fucking relaxed. I'm a month before I get out, and I find out that my passport's revoked because I have a warrant in Georgia for something I completely forgot about. And now I'm hysterical about this now. Am I going to get arrested? The marshal's telling me that I should divert my travel plans because when I land, if I go to New York, they're going to not only detain me, but they're going to ship me back they're going to ship me to Georgia 2 days before Christmas. So I get a lawyer involved. I call up a lawyer, 3 lawyers in Atlanta, and 3 lawyers in Atlanta look in the system and they say, we can't find a warrant for you. We can't find a warrant. I call up the Atlanta PD and they can't find a warrant for me. I call up, I said, well, if anybody has to have a copy of the warrant, if all those people can't find it, it has to be the DA in Atlanta, right? So I call up the district attorney in Atlanta and they tell me that they see a warrant, but the judge, I don't know if you know about this because I don't really know about this part of this, but the judge decided that they're declining to prosecute?
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
Okay, so they're declining to prosecute. So basically we're waiting for the warrant to be exited the system, but it's still a warrant. All right. I say, what do I do? Well, my lawyer says, go back to New York. If they detain you at Border Patrol, you call me up and I will get you bail in New York because supposedly there's some law that he could get me bail in New York. So now the day has finally come. I was supposed to get on, the end of my sentence is 22nd of December. And that's a Sunday. So I was either going to get out on Friday, Sunday, or Monday, but nobody gets out on Monday. But since the embassy, since I'm an American, they're going to pull some strings where I get out on Sunday. They didn't want me to get out on Friday because they thought I would leave the country before my sentence 2 days early, but they would let me out on Sunday. So all the paperwork was ready Friday. Sunday comes, I go upstairs, my mother's waiting there, I get out. But now I'm shitting my pants because I don't know if I'm going to be arrested as soon as I land in America either. So the next day we get on the plane and we fly to New York. We fly to New York and I'm waiting on, the customs line going through, when you get off the plane coming from international. And I'm so scared. And I go up to the Border Patrol agent, the guy who checks your passport. And I give him the temporary passport that I was issued. I was issued an emergency passport by the embassy that's only good for 5 days. It's a one-way basically passport to get in. And they stop me. I'm like, oh, fuck. So they bring me into this little office. And the officer who was there, and it's late. It's like 9 o'clock at night, 9:30 at night. And the officer was there, happened to be Dominican of all fucking things. Could you imagine he was Dominican? So he's Dominican. And it turns out that he knows who the DNCD is because he used to work kind of helping them out because he was a Dominican Border Patrol agent. So they pull me in and he was like, yeah, you have this thing in Georgia, but it's nothing. Just handle it when you could handle it. But you did time in DR. I was like, first of all, how do you see that? Because I'm on American soil. I'm not a criminal. I don't have a record on America. He said, Mike, I see everything. He said, tell me about what happened. So I tell him the whole story. And he's asking me questions, but not only questions that he could put in the system, but he's asking me questions like for his own shits and giggles. He knew where I was. Like, he knew that it was like one of the harshest prisons there. He knew about the DNCD. He knew what I was being charged with. He knew everything. So we finally left, and my sister-in-law picked me up with the kids. And I thought it was going to be awkward, but I got to tell you, you see your kids for the first time in 18 months, and you're 100 pounds lighter, and you haven't seen them, and they grew 6 inches, this, that, the other. But it wasn't really like awkward. We fell right back into whatever, and we've been, together ever since, just hanging out in New York. And supposedly I have to go on Thursday to Florida and figure out my life.
What was your first meal?
Pizza. It was pizza at 12 o'clock at night. I didn't eat, but it was the greatest slice of pizza I've ever eaten in my life. It was fantastic.
Does it feel weird being back home, getting back into a routine after that?
I got to tell you, everybody said that it would feel a lot weirder than it did. I felt like I adjusted properly. I'm a little anxious, I'm a little anxious. And like, I had a nightmare the other night about it. Subsequently about the wires. But like, I'm adjusting properly. I'm getting back to business. I'm starting my business again. I'm doing things, with you. I have the other thing tomorrow. But like, I'm adjusting properly. I'm seeing people. I'm telling the story 1,000 times because everybody wants to know. It's weird, but it's not. I feel like there's a part of me feels like I never left, but there's a part of me feeling like it's still surreal, like it's still surreal. Like 2.5 weeks ago, I was in a Dominican prison, and that's crazy.
You seem pretty normal for a guy that just got out of a prison after 18 months in a foreign, miserable country. And I think you're the first person I've ever interviewed that just got out so recently, you know? Yeah. And you're normal compared to guys that have done years in prison but have gotten out years ago,
But you have to understand, when you get past the divorce, which was no big deal, and you get past everything, the only thing I really wanted was to get home to my kids. So do you have kids?
No.
So when you have kids, it's an unbelievable feeling because the only thing you want to do is get back to your kids. But once you're back with the kids, you're okay. You understand what I'm saying? Even the food, even the bullshit, even, flushing a toilet and taking a fucking shower and all the niceties that we as Americans take for granted is great. Believe me, I had a great shower in the hotel before we came back to America. I was able to, go get a shave and get a haircut and, they do normal things. And that's great. And I had a bagel. It was dynamite, and I had Christmas dinner with my family, but I had my kids, and that's all that mattered. So it was okay. You understand? Like, everything was okay. At this point, after going through what I went through, I feel like there's what's going to happen? You understand what I'm saying? Like, what's going to beat me down more? I have my kids. I have my mother. She's alive, thank God. She's cancer-free. My kids are healthy. I'm healthy from what I understand. I have opportunity in front of me. So really, why shouldn't I be okay? You understand what I'm saying? That's kind of my thought process on it.
What do you think is the lesson you learned from all this? Like, what do you think it needed to teach you, that life wanted to teach you, that you now gain because you went through this?
Somebody told me a long time ago, you learn who your friends are in prison or in the hospital, when you're in prison and when you're in the hospital. Before this, I had thousands and thousands of Facebook friends, and I knew thousands and thousands of people. And if you go through my phone, I have 5,000 names and numbers in my phone, right? And I did business with a lot of people, and I ran a nationally recognized brand in my world, in my space. But in reality, if you have the opportunity to get 2 or 3 really good friends and you have your family, that's all that really fucking matters, because everybody else are unloyal pieces of shit. And that's the honest to God truth. And I have a best friend named Steph. I mentioned her once in the story. And she doesn't, they're hardworking young people. They don't have a lot of money. She's a little younger than I am. And she's married. And every day she would be on the phone with me. And she would refill, because my mother didn't know how to refill my phone, my prepaid phone. And she would be on the phone with me, and she was the other person that I could cry to, you know? And she's my ride or die, you know? And my mother, you know, with cancer, with stage 3 cancer, made sure she was in Dominican Republic and raising money and coming and dealing with life, you know? And on the phone with me 100 fucking times a day, you know? And she's a rock star. And my kids dealt with it. So the one thing I came out of this, 2 things I came out of this. Number one, have gratitude, you know? Everybody has shitty days, Ian, you know, and that's going to happen. And you're going to get curveballs thrown at you all the time. And that's fine. But there's so much to be grateful for. You know, there's just so much to be grateful for as an American, number one, even though I'm not happy with the embassy, but as an American, you know, in a first world country, you know, and be grateful and don't. And to shrink my circle, man. I don't want many people in my life. I really don't.
I learned that the hard way too, man. I keep it very close.
Is it similar? Is it a similar story to mine?
Yeah, I mean, I look at my life and I've always had waves of groups of people. Like when I first started in the concert industry, I had one group. Then when I left and did the nightclub, I had another group. And then when I went to prison, everyone abandoned me. I had a couple close friends. I had 2 friends only that came to visit me. Except for and my family members. And then when I got out, I had a new group of friends, but no one really talked to me because I wasn't like doing anything cool. And then HBO does a documentary. All those people that talk shit on Facebook come out of the woodwork.
Of course.
Then they fade back into it. And then when I'm doing this, they see the cool stuff, the celebrity photos, this and that. Yeah. Those same people, I remember them that commented, scumbag, went to prison, this and that. They're the ones liking the photos and sliding in the DMs and all that. But I keep it super.
It's strange, isn't it?
I keep it super small. Go to bed early. Don't go out late. You know, I do my thing. We've created this really cool space here. I
got to tell you, when I was actually on the phone with this friend Dustin, and he's handicapped. He has I think he has MS or something like that, and he has a lot of free time. And I was telling him my story. I talked to him towards the end of my sentence because I saw him online or whatever it might be. And he told me about this, like you. And I got to tell you, it's the coolest fucking thing in the world. I mean, what you're doing is very interesting. And it's like, it's locked up abroad, but it's not, you know, it's very different because this is a lot more personal. You're diving into what it is, you know, and the experience that is actually happening.
And also these other networks, they have the capability to do these interviews, but they don't. And they chop up your story into a million pieces and they only air segments. Yeah. That's why I hate doing those things.
Right. And have you ever done them?
I did. I just did Discovery Channel.
Did you really?
Which is coming out next month. But I did like a 12-hour interview. They're going to use 15 minutes of it, you know? And when I did the HBO doc, I filmed for 3 days and I'm just in pieces of it throughout the interview. It's not on there anymore. I have the link. I send it to people when they ask for it. Yeah, I'll send you the link. Yeah. I was one part of a 10-part series of like young crime stories.
Sure.
But they were the first ones that really shined a light on my story. Yeah. And now I'm in this weird position where like that didn't blow me up, the documentary. And I went, because I was working at Whole Foods, and I went and built this, which I built my own platform. Sure. So now there's no documentary except for like a Vice one that's 10 minutes long on YouTube that has a few million views.
Sure.
So now like we're getting approached to do stuff and things are happening, but I'm glad I was able to build my own platform without being handed one.
Right. So let me ask you a question, and this has been burning in my mind since I knew I was getting out. The question is, I mean, you have people like Kyle, you know, who pursued that avenue because he was in rehab and recovery and this, that, and the other. And then you have people like you who did something completely out of the box with this, and that's awesome. But your advice, after hearing the story I just told, to me, I don't know many people that have been in third world prisons, number one. And number two, what's your advice to me as far as, do I pursue something with this, or do I just go back to life and start producing conventions again, which I'm going to do anyway? I mean, do I pursue this?
What I've learned, and it took me, I wish I had learned it earlier, especially in COVID, because then I would have really blown up and made a ton of money and stuff, but I didn't, because I was in my own way and had that same thought process of, do you talk about the most embarrassing, hard part of your life? And the answer is you run with it, You max that puppy out, you share it, you build a platform for yourself, because the world's changing. It's a lot of it's all about personal brands. We were talking out there about how I do all of this on my own. If I just hired someone to help me, I could go start another business, but I'm not passionate about necessarily creating businesses. I like what I do here, whereas other maybe podcasters create own businesses. So to get back to your question, it's focus on using your insanely interesting story that only happens to a few select people in a lifetime. Yeah. Build a platform and use that platform to do what you're passionate about, which is maybe back into the event planning business or anything. Because think, you're going on a national platform. Plug in what you're going to be doing next, your redemption part, what you plan on doing. So then people search your name. Oh, this guy has an event. This is where I saw him. Because people still remember me from that Vice documentary or the HBO documentary, and they never would have known about me if I never had the courage to share my story. So that's the power in storytelling and sharing it.
Now, here's the other part to the question. Mm-hmm. And I like telling the story. I don't mind telling the story. And I'm not embarrassed by it by any means. But, all the people that talk shit, while you're in prison, you're a scumbag and this, that, and the other. Does that resurface?
I think it does. I mean, I'll look at my comments. When I first started, that was the hardest part to get over. That was super hard. And some of my guests struggle with that. I'll see them arguing with people in the comments, which is great for me because that boosts engagement. Of course. Now I just it's pat on the back like it's nothing. I'll see people will ask, what did this dude go to prison for? And people will say fraud. And they'll literally copy and paste a section from a crappy Danbury local news Times article saying what I did or didn't do or whatever. That eventually goes away, but that will always be there. But look at your favorite celebrities in the world, favorite actors. Someone is always going to hate on them.
Look at the president.
Yeah, there's not one person that everyone loves. Everyone's always going to have something bad to say.
Of course.
So I think that's the hardest hump about telling your story, because you're going to have those negatives.
Right.
But it'll also attract the right people to your story.
So what's the next step here? I do my national platform.
And I think you wait and see what happens.
Is that what happens?
I don't think you should. What I've learned is you don't blow your load and do 9 million of them. Be very selective.
Okay.
And you're going to have people that reach out.
Okay.
People are going to reach out. Bigger platforms than mine. Bigger platforms than the one you're going on next.
Right.
They'll reach out. You bide your time, but also focus on building your business so you have something to promote.
Of course.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And you never know. Maybe there's someone that's running sex conventions again. There's I got to pick this guy's brain. Listen, I got my book agent because he was a listener of the podcast.
Did you write a book?
We're working on it now. Nice. And I remember when I was in prison writing a book and getting out, and I pitched hundreds of literary agents and only 3 responded. And they ultimately said no.
No shit.
And I came across one of the biggest literary agents in the area right now because he was a listener of the podcast, that one of my guests was able to connect me to him.
No way.
So you just never know who's someone is going to meet or, my business partner is Chevy Chase's manager. I met him randomly.
Really?
Yeah, Chevy came on the show. He was sitting in that chair.
No shit, that's awesome.
To talk about childhood trauma and addiction and stuff. And that never would have happened if I didn't go and film this thing in Texas, who his friend introduced me to him, and he happened to be in Connecticut.
No way.
So you just never know.
It's a small world.
Podcasting opens up so many doors, sharing your story. They say seeing it.
They say that Trump got reelected on podcasts.
100%. Yeah. TikTok played a big part of it, all of that, you know, and just doing the podcast circuit.
But it's really, even though I ran a national platform, and I ran a national brand that people knew, and it's weird because you see people with stories, interesting stories, not necessarily being in a third world jail, but, interesting stories. And then you say to yourself, I speak to people that I know, and you tell them the story, and it's fucking mind blowing. It's mind blowing. It really is. It's crazy.
It's an incredible story, man. You have something special. You lived through it. You survived, and you got to run with it, bro.
No, of course. But, I'll tell you, it's weird because obviously it was the worst experience of my life, but you learn a lot. You really do. You learn a lot out of an experience like that. You learn how to deal with life alone. You learn how to deal with life alone. You learn how to adapt. You have to adapt. You have no choice, and you learn, you pick up a little language, but it's an odd, even still, you'd still feel weird, like when you were in jail, did you establish relationships with anybody in jail?
Oh, I still have some close people. Well, I have my old bunkmate who just got out after like 10 years, watches the show, and me and him bonded over this TV show Power.
And I love Power.
Yeah, and it was so cool for him. He was watching it from prison. Me interview some of the castmates. I've had Gianni, who plays Braden, on the show.
Really?
I had Patricia Callenber, who plays Tommy Egan's mom.
That's awesome.
Michael Rainey Jr. is going to come on the show. Yeah, so we used to sneak in hard drives and watch it. So to see that, was really cool for him. And he watches my content and he texts and he'll be like, this guy's a snitch, or, this, or why are you interviewing this dude? And then I've had some other guys that I was in prison with that came on the show to talk about their stories with me and life after prison and found success. And obviously there's guys you come across that end up back in prison.
Of course.
But I've met a lot of guys in my journey that are huge supporters of the show that are doing really well for themselves. A couple were like Billy Johnson, who was on my show, and Cash, who was my bunkmate, who came on too.
Well, even Kyle's doing really well now.
Yeah, exactly.
He's doing what he's doing, and he's a really nice guy, by the way.
Yeah, Kyle's a great guy.
Just a sweetheart of a guy.
Everyone always makes fun of him because he wore the tightest shirt to that interview.
He's
a short guy too.
He's a stocky guy.
But he was a good dude at that. And I'm glad that the interview recently was starting to go viral again for him. So he had a lot of people reaching out.
He even asked me, he was like, call me when you get out and I'll introduce you to my co-author and stuff like that. Because I definitely, not even for money, but I definitely have aspirations of writing a book, even for not even to get the story out, number one, but more importantly, as more of like a therapy of my own, just to get it out and tell every story and tell every, each little bit and piece that happened. I think that's therapeutic in a way,
Absolutely. But Michael, I appreciate you coming on the show today. This is incredible. I hope it was what you expected.
Thank you so much. No, you're awesome, and absolutely.
Thank you. We'll see what your kid out there thinks after watching this. It's always interesting when people bring kids to come because you don't know if they're going to hold back or what. But I don't think you held back. You were very honest.
I was always. I'll tell you before we go. I'll tell you when I got in the car. And he goes, at this point, he didn't know I was in jail. I told him the other day when I found out when I booked a national platform in you, because I had to. I would rather him find out for me than that. And he said to me, we were sitting in the car and he goes, and I lost all this weight. I told you I lost 104 pounds. And he goes, well, Daddy, you should keep off the weight. I said, I know. He said, well, if you don't, you have to go back to the Dominican Republic. I was like, oh, fuck you.